All right, well, let's get down to it. Treasury Secretary. I mean, when was the last time we really talked a lot about a Treasury Secretary? It probably goes back to the Great Depression, Herbert Hoover, right, Peter?
Well, probably, but back then, Hoover, of course, didn't listen to his Secretary of the Treasury.
That's true.
It was
he
Andrew
said to Mellon, forget about it, right?
Well, but Mellon is the one that was the sense of reason. He wanted the government to stay out of it and let the free market work, and Hoover wouldn't listen to Mellon, and of course, they ended up creating the Great Depression together with Roosevelt.
So which leads me to my question, Jeremy, and I'll get you both to give me a final thought on this. I mean, we've heard all this comparison to Herbert Hoover. I mean, is it possible it can get that bad? I mean, we're talking food lines, and that's coming up. I mean, John McCain compared Barack Obama to Hoover.
It is impossible to get that bad. That's exactly why we have deposit insurance. That's exactly why we have a Fed providing liquidity. That's exactly why we have protection of the banks. Back in the 1930s, we had thousands of banks fail, millions of depositors lose every penny. That's why we had the Great Depression. There is no possibility of that happening again.
You couldn't be more wrong, Jeremy. During the Great Depression, only about 2% of the money on deposit was lost. This time, it's all going to be completely wiped out. There is no protection. All the government has is a printing press. All they can do is ensure that we can take our money out, but they can't ensure that we buy anything with it. The government is making all the mistakes that we made in the 1930s, only they're making them bigger, and they're making them at a time where our economy is fundamentally less sound than it was. This could be every bit as bad as the 1930s, except worse, and instead of consumer prices falling, they're going to explode through the roof.
Jeremy.
Peter, it seems like they're just looking at the Hoover-Roosevelt playbook and doing exactly what they did to lengthen and deepen the Great Depression.
Of course, and they don't even realize that that's what they're doing. They got this guy in there, Ben Bernanke, who fancies himself a depression expert. He doesn't understand the first thing about the depression. And he doesn't know why we had it. He does, and he thinks the solution is just more government, that we need lower interest rates and more inflation, that if the central bank would have just printed enough money in the 1930s that we wouldn't have had a depression. And that's not true. The reason that we had that depression is, number one, the Fed inflated the stock market bubble in the 1920s, just like it inflated the stock market and housing bubble this time around. And instead of allowing the free market to work and restore balance to the economy, purge all the excesses, Hoover and then Roosevelt came up with one program after another meant to alleviate the pain, meant to make things better. And it was all the government interference that lengthened that recession and created the Great Depression. They're going to do the same thing again, only this time we're coming at it. We're not on a gold standard. We're no longer a manufacturing economy with a high savings rate. So we can't afford the foolish New Deal type programs that we could afford back then. And so the damage to our economy this time around could be fatal, because what they're going to do is destroy the currency. And if they think we've got economic problems now, wait till they see how big these problems become when our money is worthless.
But doesn't that tell you that things could, as Bernanke wrote in his papers, as an academic, the financial accelerator. Once the financial accelerator starts, you've got to go quick.
What Bernanke does see right now is that the best decisions I've ever made in my career as a Wall Street investor, and I've been pretty good, Christine, is to admit that I'm wrong. Dead wrong, get out, go out, sell it, and do something else. And I think Bernanke has a brilliant record. He has studied the Depression probably in greater detail than anyone else. Peter, that really is foolish on your part. No, it is. To call someone who spent his entire life studying something clueless.
He wasted his time.
No,
he is clueless.
Peter,
he doesn't understand it at all.
Well, Peter, come on. You can't be the only guy right in the room.
No, but I know that he's wrong.
Well, you cannot. No, I don't think he is wrong.
He's dead wrong.
Let's talk about
on its feet, then we can start thinking about taking away some
liquidity. The economy's not going to be back on its feet. The government's not going to let that happen. You're assuming that the government can solve these problems. They can't. They can't micromanage this economy. It didn't work in the 1930s. The Politburo couldn't micromanage the Russian economy. We need to put our faith in the free market, in capitalism, in market forces. We can't let these cronies in Washington try to set prices, fix prices, decide which companies fail, which companies don't. This is going to be a disaster much bigger than the one they're trying to fight.
Can I just say one thing? I want to say one thing. Yeah, the reason why the 1929 stock market crash turned into a Great Depression was this kind of thinking, that we let it burn, let the market work, and we saw what happened. No, that's not what we did. That's a myth. That's exactly what we did.
No, we didn't. We did it. We interfered. We didn't let the market work. You got to reread your history.
All right.
Look, there's this conventional wisdom, which happens to be wrong, that we need to run surpluses or balanced books. 70% of the time in the history of the country, we have never done so. We've grown the biggest economy this world has ever seen. In the 1930s, we applied these principles, and it wasn't only the United States, it was the world. We had a global depression. And by the way, many countries pulled out of their depressions far earlier than the United States did. It was really wartime spending that got us out because we kind of held back. We took this course of fiscal conservatism.
You ought to read Murray Rothbard's book on the Great Depression to really understand. You constantly rewrite history. You know,
this is not the 1930s.
100% wrong.
You're the one that brought
Go ahead, Wayne. Go ahead,
Read
Wayne.
Rothbard's book, The Great Depression.